Hello everyone, thanks for coming to the channel. On this day, it was an early August day, and we came to Fort Edmonton, which is a living museum pretty much, celebrating the history from basically the fur trade over to about 1920s. This is the star of the show, a steam train, which is a 1919 Baldwin, and will take you from the station at the main gate all the way to the fort, which is a representation of a fur trading fort from 1846. It's about a 4 kilometer ride, I believe, this train, so it's well worth it. So this is outside the fort right now, so this is a representation of a Native American village that would have been outside the fort at the time, wanting to trade for goods and whatnot. This is going inside. So to give a little bit of history of this fort, so this recreation represents a 1846 era, and it was a recreation of the Hudson Bay Company's Edmonton House, or Fort Edmonton, which was established as a trading post in the area. It is estimated that at the time there was about 110 people living here, but depending on the season. The fort existed in various locations from 1795 to 1914, various locations and various types of structural. The first being at Fort Saskatchewan, then moving over to the Rosedale area of Edmonton, and then moving back up the stream, North Saskatchewan, up near the Smoky Lake, Alberta area, back to the Rosedale area of Edmonton, and then finally to the present area of the legislature, which is what this reconstruction represents. So you can see in here a store here of the fur trade and whatever goods that you may be able to buy at the time in the fur trading store. And if you go back, you can see the supplies, the storage supplies and all that. His living quarters that they would be sleeping in, as well as some pretty big traps. Now this is the main house, which I believe they were called the chief factor, would lived in, so things are a little more posh here, as you can see. So all his family would live here as well, where he could also entertain. And it's also where he would oversee and run the administration of the fort. Main cupboard there with a kitchen, and then you'd go into the main dining hall here where he would entertain any important guests that just happen to come by, important explorers. And downstairs here, this is another kitchen area, as well as some more living quarters, dining quarters, I guess would be a better description. So this is moving on now within the grounds. This is the 1885 street area. And you see, the first thing you see is a farm area, and it has, it's a bit of a petting zoo. You can pet the pigs, you can pet the goat, and you can look at the displays around the area. On this day, I think it was allowing passengers to ride horse-driven wagons. But yeah, some displays of the early pioneering times. Covered wagon here. As well as chickens. I've been to this place several times, and these chickens are always here. Tack house, or tack store I should say. And yeah, we just happened to see them changing out the horses at this time, which was cool. There's an old hardware store with everything you could need in the day. These old wood stoves now, they're almost like works of art nowadays. I should also mention that those bicycles, I have seen people ride them in the past. I don't know if they ride them anymore, but the people that dress up and make the experience more real, I guess. The park actors, I guess you could call them. Some of the old porcelain of the time. An old school with a potbelly stove. It was the beginning of August, and just walking in here made me feel cold. Stagecoach? Not really sure how much stagecoaches were used up in Canada. My history on that is a bit vague. I'm more familiar with the Americans using them, but if somebody knows, let me know how much they're used in Canada. Back of the stables, with a little horse. This is actually within the fire hall, and they had a couple of these old fire trucks. Don't have much information on them. I can only tell you that one was a Bickle. That's about all I know. Outside of that, they were used in the Edmonton Fire Department. But in pretty good shape. The oil pan underneath collecting the oil tells me that they might be running still. I guess a photographer's store recreation, some photos of the time. An old church. The old church is, as far as I know, on 1905 Street at this point, so this is the representation of what Edmonton was like in 1905. Some rules for the students at the time. And a streetcar. There's, you can ride on those streetcars just like the trains. It's well worth it. It's difficult to know right now because of COVID, but I didn't see any cars driving around. In the past, I've seen cars, old antique cars driving around, and you can get into them and go for a ride if you like. But I hadn't seen them this year, and yeah, COVID, you never know. Probably had something to do with that. This is on 1905 Street again, one of the houses on the street, representing the time. One of my favorite houses, actually, in this Fort Edmonton area. Streetcar again. This is a bank. And you go upstairs here and you find some law offices. The look of the time in 1905. Very old and nostalgic. A beautiful old desk. Early representation of a switchboard there. Yeah, it said crank 2 times. I think you could dial somebody, but nothing came up. And a more advanced switchboard when people got more into phones at the time. So this is actually on 1920 Street now. This is a pharmacy showing you the various items, drugs you can get of all kinds. It's kind of amusing. If you look here, there's a box saying worm syrup. It's like, oh, would you like some worm syrup? No, thank you. I'm not interested in your worms. I'm quite happy without them. Thank you very much. Beautiful old cash register. Yeah, they were doing a reenactment of some kind. I believe a marriage here in front of the old Capitol Theatre. So we took a quick look. $1929 Capitol Theatre, that was. Here's in a farmstead. That's incidentally the same car that was outside the theater. Yeah, an old barn, old farm representation with actual horses. A bit of a peekaboo horse here. And there's a better view of them. Probably one of the first half tons, I would guess. I believe that's a 1920s Harley Davidson. The sidecar makes it pretty rare. And then, yeah, something they created, what was that, about 12 years ago, was a Midway, 1920s Midway. And yeah, just a few shots here of the carousel. There's roughly 32 hand-carved and painted horses here that local people had built. If you look closely at the horses, you can see some green tape here. And I can only assume that that's areas of chipping and needed repair. That day, nobody was allowed to ride them, so I assume that maybe it's time for repair. They put a lot into those, so I can see why they're wanting to conserve them. An actual running Ferris wheel. Incidentally, guys, by my camera's timer, this thing had a 10-second revolution, so pretty fast.
10 seconds.
But yeah, the steam train down there by the station at the front door, front gate, I should say. But yeah, there's Fort Edmonton, a living museum in Edmonton, Alberta. Well worth taking the time to visit. Thanks for stopping by. See you soon.